Hi coders. A good place to start when you are building an app is to just dive in and design a screen. So take the core concept in your app and make a screen that's going to be one of the main screens. Not the starting screen, but just one of the screens with the main pieces of information in your app. This is a world religions app, and I've started by designing a screen for a specific religion, Islam. I have an icon and then information about the religion and more images about the religion. So let's dive in and do that. So we'll start with a blank app and we're going to talk about naming your screen elements. We'll talk about fonts. We'll talk about centering your screen elements and putting images on the screen. So first of all, to start building the screen, go to the Design tab. And if you haven't done it already, click through each of these screen elements and learn what they're about. We've been working a lot with labels. This is going to be the main label for the name of the religion. So I'll give it a meaningful name. We'll call it name label. And that's much better than label one because once we start coding it up, we don't know what label one refers to. But if we give it a meaningful name, then we can know what screen element we're talking about in our code. So we'll call this one name label, and we'll put some default text in here, Islam. And we want this to be big, so we'll make it font size 30. And right away you can see that the label is fitting the text inside. But we're going to change that text with our code. It might say Christianity, it might say Buddhism. So it's going to be, could be potentially a lot wider. Let's use all the screen real estate. The screen is 320 pixels wide. So we can make it 320 pixels wide. Although we want to leave a little bit of margin on each side. We don't want to fill it all the way across because it looks like we're crowding the screen. So we'll make it 300 pixels wide. And let's do a little bit of math to center that precisely. We know that if the screen is 320 pixels wide and our label is using 300 pixels, then 320 minus 300 leaves 20 pixels for margin. And since we want that to be equal on each side, we would divide that in half and we could use 10 pixels on each side. So if I make the X position 10, then I know I have 10 pixels here, then 300 pixels for my label, and then 10 pixels here, so it's perfectly centered. Of course, you can see the text is not centered. That's because it's aligned left. So we've centered the label, now we'll center the text inside the label, and that looks nice. It's perfectly centered. We should pay deliberate attention to our fonts. For blocks of text, it's good to use serif fonts. And for headers and titles, it's good to use sans serif fonts. And the difference is that serif fonts have these little decorative elements. The idea is that they draw your eye from one letter to the next, and they're really good for long blocks of text like paragraphs. But then fonts without serifs are really good for titles and big headlines. So Georgia, Palatino, Times, Courier are serif fonts. So those are good for blocks of text. We're going to use something that's good for titles and headlines, which are all these sans serif, down here, starting with Arial Black. These are all sans serif fonts. Let's go to Verdana. That looks good. We'll go with that. Of course, we can change the text color. We can change the background of the label and all these elements. Okay, so great. That's a great label element. Let's talk about images. So for an image, we want to drag an image screen element onto the screen. And again, we want to center this precisely. So the width is 100. We know the whole screen is 320. 320 minus 100 leaves 220. Divided by 2 leaves 110. So we want 110 pixels of margin on each side. And look at that. We eyeballed it perfectly. Our X position is 110. So we know we have 110 pixels here. Then we have our 100 pixel image. Then we have another 110 pixels here. So it's perfectly centered. And how do we get the image to appear on here? Well, first of all, we have to go find an image. It's a good idea to use open source images. So we can use, let's look here. Let's look at Wikimedia Commons. These images are not trademarked. We can use them freely. And we'll look for a star and crescent. And we come down here and we find an image we like. And then we can just right click on that image and save that image as a PNG or an SVG. Save it to a file. I like to make a file called images. We'll save this as Crescent 2. We'll save this as a PNG. And we actually already have this saved in our app lab, so we'll just go to that. And so we've saved it on our computer. To get it into App Lab, we can hit Choose on this image property. Then we can upload files, and we can go to our image folder, and we can find the image we want. And so let's use crescent.png, and we just click on that, and then it uploads into App Lab, and we'll choose this asset, and there we go. And notice what fills in the image property. The file name, crescent.png, is what fills in the image property, and we've loaded an image to our screen. So there you have it. Center your labels mathematically, give them meaningful names. We didn't give this a meaningful name. Before we go, let's call this icon image. Pay attention to fonts, what's good for blocks of text, what's good for headlines, and continue to build out your screen with buttons, more labels, and text areas for large blocks of text. That's a good place to start when you're building your app. Build out your labels, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.